Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today's guest is a man who redefines what it means to push past your limits. David Brown was just 5 foot 3 inches tall and 110 pounds, but that didn't stop him from becoming a decorated U.S. Navy SEAL, serving around the globe, and later leading major federal investigations as a special agent. His story is proof that grit and heart matter more than size or circumstance. This is an inspiring conversation about perseverance, mindset, and finding strength in the face of adversity that you don't want to miss. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by David Brown. David's journey exemplifies resilience and determination. Despite standing at just 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighing 110 pounds, David defied expectations to become a U.S. Navy SEAL, where he served in the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. After his naval career, he became a special agent with the Naval Criminal Investigative Services and served in leadership roles at the EPA's Criminal Investigation Division and the Department of the Interior. He is the author of And Goliath, the littlest Navy SEAL's inspirational story about living your biggest life. And in this book, David offers readers a candid look into the resilience required to overcome life's adversities. And I am excited to have him on the show to hear his amazing story. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on the show, sir. And I'm interested to hear about your journey and how you overcame some of the most challenging training in the world, and then serving as a Navy SEAL, and then continuing into law enforcement. So, such an inspirational story of how you overcame some of these challenges, and that's kind of what I want to highlight in this episode. But you grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, coal country. How did that affect your decisions in life? Your how did it influence you in just in your journey that you took throughout your life?
It's a pretty interesting story, enough so I would write a book about it, right? So you don't grow up in northeastern Pennsylvania in coal country and say, "Oh, that's where a Navy SEAL is going to come from." And there's a few stories there. One being that, I was a little kid, and when you say I was small going into SEAL training, well, I was a small kid from the beginning. So go to school. Remember first, second, third grade, the littlest kid that you saw in grade school? I was that kid, smaller than even the littlest girl usually. And so what happens when you're the littlest kid? You get picked on. So one of the first memorable stories that I remember is I was being picked on and I ran home to my mom, who was a fiery Irish woman who just didn't take anything from anyone. So when I went home crying, and she put me up on her knee and she said, "Okay, what happened?" And I told her about being picked on at school by a big kid. And she said, "Well, nobody's going to pick on my little boy. I'm going to tell you what to do. I want you to ball up your fist." And she had me punch her fist. I'm sorry, her hand real hard. She said, "You just keep punching that." And it brought a smile to my face, really. She's like, "And if anybody picks on you, you just ball up your fist and you smack them right in the kisser," she would say. And so going forward, that's what I did. The next day I went in, I got picked on. We were out in the playground and pow, I popped the kid right in the face. And the fight ensued and we went back and forth. And the bottom line was we ended up being friends, is the funny part. But I learned to stick up for myself. And that was really important. And you would think, wow, that my mom brought out this quality or gave me the quality, let's say, of confidence. And when I was went to do the research for my book, I'm like, why am I the way I am? I went to be a SEAL and I did all these other things in life. I had to answer the question, why? Why did I have this persistence in me? And so I went out and did some research and I found a guy named Robert Plomin, who's a behavioral geneticist. And he wrote a book called Blueprint. And in his book, it's called DNA, How DNA Makes Us Who We Are. Really insightful book. And I read the whole thing and I'm like, wait a second, this is starting to explain why I am the way I am. And so when I look at that story about my mom, it wasn't the fact that she gave me confidence, but she gave me an opportunity to express my confidence. And that's what the other stories that we're going to go forward with here is people don't wait for opportunities to happen. People actually go out and seek these opportunities. And that was part of my personality. Going forward, I had this confidence as a little kid, and then I go into high school and I decide I'm probably about just under 5 feet tall. I weigh about 89 pounds, and I decide I'm going to go out for the football team. Like that doesn't make any sense to most people, right? Because in high school, football players start at like 150 pounds, but I went out for a football team and I got my butt kicked. And I just got pulverized into the dirt. And as we were going through these practices, I had what I found out now is called basically a quitting spiral. I found excuses to quit. I found reasons why it was easier not to be on the football team and I could be doing other things that are easier. And I quit. It was one of the most influential moments in my life. And I felt so bad. I felt bad because I had left my teammates. I felt bad because I thought I was a confident person and I just basically destroyed myself. And for almost a year, I did nothing as a very confident person would do until I joined the wrestling team. There was something inside of me, back to the persistence part. I couldn't leave myself alone and say, wait a second, you're a failure, Dave. You quit the football team, so now you're just going to be a regular kid in high school. It wasn't in my personality to do that. So I joined the wrestling team, and in wrestling, you get to wrestle the people your own weight. So, and I was 98 pounds all the way till I was a high school senior. I wrestled
Mm.
98 pounds in high school senior, and I did well. I did well enough to get to realize, wait a second, quitting once doesn't end your life and you can get over it. So, and that's what I did. I got my confidence back in the wrestling team, and the wrestling team taught me how to win at all costs. If you ever, if you've been a wrestler or you've been to a wrestling match, it's 6 minutes of the most intense intensity you could ever imagine to try to beat one-on-one a person. And I got to the district finals, and I was hurt. I got hurt in the semifinal round, hurt my shoulder, and I was in the finals, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to manage to win, still being hurt. And through the confidence I had and my coach's encouragement, I went out into the final round and I beat the guy who was supposed to, by all manner of explanation, was supposed to win the district champion. And I went out to be the underdog and I beat the guy. And that's when I learned two things. Number one, confidence trumps a lot, but I understood that you could do things even though you were hurt. There's another story in the book that I talk about where it's Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a book by another psychologist, and basically what he says is your brain is not a direct connect to all your pains in your body. There's no ouchometer, if you will, is the way he put it. So just because you're hurting doesn't mean you can't continue on. And that was a big lesson because when I got to BUDS, basic underwater SEAL training, that played an important role into understanding that just because I was hurt, and believe me, I got hurt, and we can talk about that, I did not quit. It was a matter of mind over matter, continuing on in your pursuit of what you had in your mind. And so those were the three stories that we talked about. And that was in Pennsylvania, when I learned how to stick up for myself. I learned the value of quitting and what a horrible feeling that was. And then the recovery of that on the other side in the wrestling, and how good winning felt, and how you can overcome even painful situations and still come out successful.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I can see where those early years, gave you confidence for the rest of your life. Like you had those opportunities to overcome really difficult things, and you felt the feeling of quitting, but yet you saw the also the feeling of victory and pushing through and persevering through pain to be able to achieve that championship was just really remarkable. Tim, now, so the question I get is, okay, you're in you're in Pennsylvania. There's not famous for a lot of oceans, and you decide to join the Navy and eventually pursue the idea of going to become a Navy SEAL. Where did that seed get planted? Because that's not something that you decide to do overnight, I imagine.
Well, this was back in the late 70s, 79 to be 79, as far as when I decided I was going to be a Navy SEAL. But before that, I had this infatuation of being under the sea, being in the
Mm,
water. I and I loved the movies and the spy movies, the James Bond and the Get Smart even and the all the all the I'm trying to remember all of them, but the action adventure stories. Um, I'm trying to remember all of them. Anyway, I can't remember all of them right now, but I was a big fan of Jacques Cousteau. So Jacques Cousteau was my hero. So when you combine Jacques Cousteau and 007, what do you have? You have Jacques Cousteau with a machine gun, right? So I'm looking for an occupation that is the Jacques Cousteau under the water, but I want to blow stuff up and I want to shoot things. So in my search of finding that occupation, I ended up going to the Navy and they gave me this occupational book, the ratings book. I was an enlisted guy. And I started looking through it, and the recruiter said, pick something that you would like to do. And I turned the page, and there is this page that says UDT SEAL, Underwater Demolition Team SEAL Team. And I read the description. I'm like, holy mackerel, they do everything that I've ever wanted to do as a kid. And this is the job that I want to do. So I go back into the recruiter and I said, this is what I want to do. And the recruiter looks down at me because let's face it, I'm 5'3" and I weigh less than 100 pounds. And I tell him I want to be a UDT SEAL, and he laughs and he says, no, 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 no. You need to go back and read that book again, and you need to pick something that you can actually do. You're not going to be a Navy SEAL. You need to pick something you can do. So I didn't know anything or any better. So I went home, I looked at the book again, and I'm like, wait a second, who's this guy telling me what I can do and what I can't do? I went back in there and I said, look, no, this is what I want to do. I want to be a SEAL. And he says, you know what? If that's what you want to do, fine, we'll sign you up and we'll see what happens. So I went in the Navy and I went to boot camp. And I was going to, back then, you had to have an A school, which was basically a technical trade. So I signed up to be a radarman and went to radarman. Or before I went to radarman school, I had to go in boot camp and pass the UDT SEAL screening test. And so I go down there with like 50 guys and we start taking the screening test, and these guys are dropping off like flies. They're not doing the push-ups, they're not doing the swim. Then we get to the run, and we're on the run, and I finish the run, and I'm the first guy finished the run. We go in, and they start naming the names off who's going to be go to SEAL training, and it was a double test. Whoever didn't make it to go to SEAL training was going to go to underwater demo or uh, EOD, explosive ordnance
yep.
disposal, which is not quite as difficult physically in the training. And so everybody sat on one bench, and they're like, Brown, we're going to have you sit over here. And so here I am, the littlest guy of the whole field, and they say, you guys qualified for EOD. Brown, you're the only one who qualified for SEAL team,
Wow.
or you buds, I should say, not SEAL team. But we'll give you an opportunity to see if you can make it. And so there you go. I went off to Coronado and basic underwater demolition SEAL training.
When someone tells you you can't do something, did that fuel some of the determination to be able to prove them wrong?
Go back to the personality test. We've all had them, right? Everybody says you're this, or remember that people would say, you're just like your mom, or you're just like your dad, right? Well, that was me. I mean, if somebody said I couldn't, that means I'm going to. It was
Mm,
100%. It wasn't something that oh, Brown, you can't do this, or you get picked last. I got picked last in every sport when I was in grade school. If that affected me, I would have never been anything in my life, right? So
yeah,
whenever somebody said you couldn't, that was what I was going to do.
yeah. Now, when you went through Buds, what were some of the unique challenges you had because of your size and weight, maybe compared to some of your peers? It would seem like one of the things my grandfather was World War II on destroyer escorts, and he said when he joined the Navy, he says the key is to not be noticed. He says you don't want to stand out one way or the other. You don't want to be the slowest guy. You don't want to be the fastest guy. You just want to sit right in the middle of the pack. That's how you survive. And sort of always stood in my back of my mind. So that helped me get through things. I would sort of just make sure I was in the pack somewhere so I wasn't standing out. You stood out on day one. I mean, you couldn't avoid that. It was just your size. What were some of the unique challenges that you faced at Buzz that other people maybe didn't have to deal with?
Well, and let's just you start with the size, and you can imagine any time any we had to carry anything, I was at a big disadvantage. Anytime we had to reach high or jump high, I was at an extreme disadvantage. Just the scuba tanks that we strapped on in second phase, each tank weighs almost 30 pounds. I weighed at that time probably 112, 113 pounds, and I got over 60 pounds on my back. So more than my half my body weight hanging off my back. And the instructors didn't care that Dave Brown was the littlest. When they say do your push-ups with the tanks on, if you couldn't do it, you're out. And that was the great thing about SEAL training is they didn't care. They didn't care about if you were big. They didn't care if you were small. They didn't care if you were cold. They didn't care if you were hot. They just knew what the standard was. If you didn't meet that standard, you didn't make it through. And I had to figure out ways of getting over those difficulties, whether it was physically. Remember the wrestling story. I was really strong for being 100 pounds. I lifted a lot of weights and I could manage my own weight. So when we did things like the obstacle course and I could fly through like a monkey because I had so much upper body strength, or I could barely eke out the push-ups with the tanks, but I still did it. But I had a disadvantage as much as the big guy had a
Mm,
disadvantage,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Because I got to do 20 pull-ups. Well, I could do 20 pull-ups in a heartbeat. Well, he's got to carry at least twice as much weight on his pull-ups. So he's got to go through. So I wasn't the only disadvantaged guy in Buds. Believe me, I had my challenges, but everybody had their challenges. I mean, let's face it. I mean, there were kids, I shouldn't say kids because they weren't kids. There were guys who had difficulty on the test. Some guys hated the water. It was freezing. And some guys hated the being melting down, running down the Coronado Silver Strand in the summertime when it seems like 1,000,000 degrees and you're up to your ankles in sand, running in boots. Everybody had their difficulties. But here's the key: you had to figure out how to get over that, and you never. Here's a story, and you probably heard, how do you get through Buzz? They like to say, don't quit. That's baloney. That's baloney. And let me tell you, after going through an entire career at the federal government and with the Navy, I can tell you not quitting is not enough.
Mm,
It doesn't work that way because you can not quit and still fail. You can not quit in Buds and still fail to run. You cannot quit in Buds and fail to swim. You cannot quit on a SEAL mission and lose your life, or worse, lose the life of your buddy next to you. It's not a matter of not quitting. You have to succeed. You have to be the person to step up and go further, faster, and harder in order to succeed. That's the difference between the people who quit and the people who graduated.
mm. What it's interesting because I think there's a physical side to it, obviously, right? We can all sort of figure I've been on that beach. I know how difficult it is just walking in that sand, let alone running in boots. And uh so there's a physical side of it. What about the mental side of it? So, how did you approach it from a mental standpoint? Did your experiences through wrestling, through football, those kind of experience help you in terms of having the right mental mindset to be able to, like you said, not just not quit but to win at every event that you had to do?
There was a particular time for me in first phase when that was Well, there's two quick stories I want to tell you. There's my first, I had to go through buds twice.
Hmm.
First time I got there early. I was 3 months doing exercises, doing all the things early in first phase, right before Hell Week. I was having some really big problems with my legs, a lot of pain, big knots in my shins. We did a 4 mile time run on the beach. I could hardly walk by the time I was done. I was like 4 minutes late, dragging. I looked like Igor from Young Frankenstein, like dragging my leg across the finish line. They send me to sick bay. I go in there, I get a bone scan. They find out the next day I'd broken both of my tibias, cracked stress fractures, my ankle, and I had a pulled groin muscle. And I ran 4 miles. They said, they brought me into the office. They basically said, Brown, you just ran 4 miles on two broken legs and a pulled groin muscle. You get another chance. You're coming back for the next class. Went back to the next class, and I was still having trouble running. It's this thing called a goon squad. If you don't keep up with the pack, they put you in basically a torture squad that they make you to do all these horrible exercises. And here I am in this goon squad, and I got to carry this guy called Guma Tao Tao. Now, Tony Guma Tao Tao is a Samoan guy.
Oh, geez.
Tony is 5'10" and weighs 220 pounds. And they paired me up with Tony Guma Tao Tao during the goon squad, and we had a race over the berm, jump in the surf. We switch. He carried me over to the surf, and then we had to switch partners. He had to get on my back, and I had to carry him up over the other side of the berm. And I had to carry basically a Volkswagen on my back up and over the sand berm, and I did it, and we won the race. But this is what I knew after carrying Guma Tao Tao. I couldn't do that again, and I was not going to be in the goon squad again. So our next soft sand run, I was falling behind again, and there's the ambulance right behind me, basically saying, "Come on, Brown, get in. You're not going to make it. You're going to go in the goon squad. You're going to quit." All those things running through my mind. And there was a decision in my life, and it is the key decision for me, that I was either going to catch up to them, or I was going to die right there in that sand, on that sand. It was a life or death decision for me. And I'm telling you, I know not many people can say this. I had an outer body experience. The pain went away, the tiredness went away, and I sprinted up and caught up to the rest of the pack. And it was like I was looking down on myself as it all happened. I caught up and I never fell behind again. And you asked the question, mentally, how do you do that? And you have to get over your mental limitations.
Hmm.
Physically, I did physically. You have to convince yourself that it doesn't matter what you're feeling, because it's what you can do. You can do more. You can do more. And that's what they instilled in us. And that's what I finally broke through, that mental barrier. And ever since then, nothing can stop me. Nothing can stop me mentally or physically. And I I attribute the success of my career for that moment in my life, understanding that I was willing to die right there or be a better person. And I ran. It was as simple as that.
One of the things I found in my career, and I don't know if this is consistent with what you found, is that when you have those moments where you overcome something that is like the way you describe it is just unbelievable, that you had that decision, you basically said, look, I'm not going to go in that ambulance, I am going to win, and you overcame that really difficult point in your life. Do you feel like that gave you a sort of like a high water mark for the rest of your life, to say like whatever you were dealing with, whatever the problem was, it was not as bad as that situation on the beach, and then you remember, I overcame that, I can overcome whatever comes my way? Does that give you confidence for the future when you face other trials and difficulties?
Well, 100%. We needed that. I needed that as a Navy SEAL, to be able to jump out of an airplane in the middle of the night into, black ocean somewhere, understand that I was going to go do a mission and I was going to come home and I was going to come home. That's it. I know I'm going to go there. Whatever the obstacle is, I'm going to overcome it. And I'm going to go home. So, number one, that was the first mindset you had to have being a SEAL. Later on in my life, and I wrote about this in the book, it was the lowest part in my life. I mean, here I was the special agent in charge for a major law enforcement organization. I was under internal investigation for reasons we don't even I can talk about or not. My wife was divorcing me. My girlfriend had just passed away from breast cancer,
Oh, jeez.
and I was a complete basket case. And I look back at that part in my life where my entire world was crumbling. And I got to look back at the moment I was in first phase, running through the sand, understanding that it was a life or death situation for me. And that nothing could be more difficult than that. Even this what I just described to you, career, death, divorce. That's how I was able to withstand those difficult things.
So, it's interesting because when we go through tough times, we have difficulties in our careers and our lives. If we go through difficult things and we persevere and we come out the other side, I think it's good for us. Like we become like I think that gives us a maybe a I don't know if that's the right word, but like almost a superpower that we've accomplished something very difficult. Like I've spent 10 years in entrepreneur. It's one of the most difficult things I've ever done, but it's not the most difficult thing I've ever done. So to me, people say, well, what's it like being an entrepreneur? Well, it kind of sucks. It's difficult. But it's not as hard as what I had to do in the Navy. So to me, like mostly my life off the boats has been so much easier than my life on the boats. So like if you do difficult things, I think it helps you do more difficult things in your life. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but it's what I've found in my career.
You're 100% right. And some people will say that, adversity builds character. I question that and I would say, no, adversity reveals the character that you have.
Yeah.
It's in you. And go back to Robert Plomin's book, DNA. The things, your qualities are set in you. You have them. It's just a matter of you bringing them out. And if adversity, the more adversity you encounter, the more you can develop that character that you have and be that better person. Don't I don't believe people give you qualities. I believe they're inside you just dying to come out. You just have to give them opportunities. And the
Yeah.
more difficult things you've been through just shows you the real person that you really are.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of lessons can we give our listeners today that are leaders that maybe they're facing difficulties, maybe they're facing challenges? I heard one time someone said the worst thing that ever happens to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. So it may not be as bad as something it may not be on a beach, trying not to die, right? But it may still be the most difficult thing that they've ever gone through. What kind of advice would you give to the people that are maybe facing some sort of adversity right now? What's the best what are some lessons from the book that you could give our listeners about how to overcome those challenges?
Take a quote from SEAL training, and that is the only easy day was yesterday. And when I say that, it's not in a negative way. We had what we called evolutions in BUDS, SEAL training. Everything we did was an evolution. And you knew that if it was a 3 hour evolution, when the clock struck 12, it was over. You were successful. You succeeded in that evolution. There's another one coming, but you have to understand, get through the evolution. The only easy day was yesterday. That was yesterday. Look forward, be positive, and understand the evolution will end no matter how good or no matter how bad. And you just move on to the next one.
I love that. I love that. Get through the evolution. It's such a great piece of advice. That is fantastic. I love that. I love that story. This has been a fantastic conversation. I know we've just sort of scratched the surface on this book, but I really encourage our listeners to get the book and to dive into it a lot more. But what kind of final message would you like to leave with our listeners today?
It's a positive one. I've gone through a lot and I've been through a few things. And the most important thing that I learned from writing a book, and I think everyone should write their memoir. I think it's important, get that out there, but to understand, stop and smell the roses. This is my big lesson that I have for everyone. Enjoy every day because they're going to come to an end one day, and enjoy your family and enjoy the opportunities that you have every day. Don't take anything for granted. I did for many years. I took my family for granted and I took my spare time for granted. And now I am a much happier person because I enjoy them. I enjoy every morning, every day that I'm alive.
That is a great advice. Yeah, we're not going to live forever, so you every day is important. And again, the only easy day was yesterday, right? So it's going to be difficult, right? And so just gear up, be ready for the fight, and it's just get through the evolution. I love that kind of simple advice because in my experience, difficult times they never last forever, right? You get through them, and then you come out the other side. You just gotta, when if you're going through hell, just keep going, right? And that there's an answer at the back end if you can persevere through it, and you become better off having overcome difficulties. So I love that. Fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about you and this new book?
Hey, go to my webpage, udtdave.com. Lots of fun stuff. You'll enjoy it.
Fantastic. We're going to put the link in the show notes for Dave's resources, and you go to his website. The book is there. I highly encourage it. It's called And Goliath, and you can imagine it's David and Goliath. So David facing the challenges of what he faced in his life, overcame it. This is the kind of story we need to read. We need to be inspired by others. Here's a great story that you can be inspired by when you're learning how to persevere, how to get through difficulties. David has been through some big difficulties and he's overcome them. And I think we can all learn from his story. So, David, thank you for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your story, your journey, and thanks for your service to the country.
Thanks, John. I had a wonderful time. And thanks to your viewers. You have a great podcast. Thank you.
Thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.